The Ranchr needed her cooking, but his lonely nights begged for more. James Carter woke up before the sun. The soft glow of early morning light had not yet touched the vast fields of his ranch, but the sounds of nature were already stirring. Pows loud in the distance, roosters crowed, and the wind whispered through the tall grass. James swung his legs off the bed and took a deep breath. Another long day awaited him. Another day where the work never ended. Life on the ranch had always been hard, but for James, it was the only life he knew. Every corner of the property carried memories of years spent alone, mending fences, feeding the animals, and managing the land that his family had worked for generations. He had learned to depend on no one but himself. Friends and neighbors were distant, and family had drifted away over the years. His only companion was the vast emptiness of the land and the stars that lit the nights. Despite the beauty of the ranch, there was a loneliness that clung to him like the dust on his boots. He tried to ignore it, throwing himself into work from dawn until dusk, but the nights were the hardest. Dinner was usually a simple meal he cooked himself, and after that, silence filled the empty rooms of the ranch house. The walls, though sturdy and solid, seemed cold at night. James often found himself staring out the window at the dark fields, wishing for someone to share even the smallest moments with, but he had convinced himself that no one could ever understand the life he led. That morning, as James repaired a broken fence near the cattle field, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden sound of approaching footsteps on the gravel driveway. Curious, he turned his head to see a small figure walking toward the house. She carried a small bag and moved with purpose. James squinted, shielding his eyes from the rising sun. The woman looked unfamiliar, but something about her presence made him pause. Her name was Emma Hernandez. She had recently moved to the town near James's ranch. She was a cook by trade, and her reputation for creating delicious, comforting meals had reached even the small community where James lived. Emma had faced her own struggles, moving away from family, finding work, and adjusting to a new life far from home. She had answered a small advertisement James had placed in the town newspaper. Cook needed for ranch work. Temporary or permanent. She had come out of necessity but carried with her the hope of new beginnings. James watched as she approached the house, her steps confident but careful, as if she was testing the ground before fully stepping into it. When she reached the porch, she looked up and smiled politely. "Mr. Carter?" she asked. "Yes," James replied, trying to keep his voice neutral. His eyes studied her for a moment. She looked capable, and there was a certain warmth in her presence that seemed almost out of place in the stark ranch surroundings. "You must be Emma! Come on in!" The house was modest but sturdy. Inside, it smelled faintly of wood, leather, and the lingering scent of the last meal he had made. James gestured for Emma to set her bag down, trying to suppress a hint of nervousness. It wasn't often he had visitors, and he certainly hadn't expected someone to be here to cook for him. Emma looked around the kitchen with interest, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the space she would soon call her workplace. "It's a nice kitchen," she said softly. "Spacious. Plenty of room to work." "I try to keep it functional. Not much time for decoration out here." He paused.
"I hope you can start soon. The cows need feeding, and I usually eat early." Emma smiled, unbothered by the straightforward manner in which he spoke.
Breaths. She was used to practical people and knew that in some lives, efficiency mattered more than small talk.
"I can start today if you like," she said.
"I can make something simple for lunch," James agreed, and they got to work immediately. He guided her through the kitchen, showing where supplies were kept and explaining the schedule he kept. Emma listened attentively, taking mental notes and asking a few questions here and there. James noticed that she was organized, careful, and thorough, qualities that would make her reliable. But more than that, there was a warmth about her, an easy presence that seemed to make the old ranch house feel less empty. When lunch was ready, they sat together at the small wooden table, Emma had made a simple but delicious meal of roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, and bread she had baked herself. James took a bite, his eyes widening slightly. He had never realized how much he had missed a home-cooked meal that felt like it came from the heart. "This is good," he said simply. Breath. Emma smiled, a little shyly.
Thank you.
Death. I like cooking. It's something I enjoy sharing with others. Bration. James nodded. He wasn't used to talking about emotions, but for some reason, the meal stirred something inside him. For the first time in years, the quiet walls of the ranch house felt alive, and he realized how empty his nights had been. Over the next few days, Emma settled into her role. She cooked every meal with care, cleaned the kitchen, and even offered to help with some of the ranch chores when she could. Her presence brought a rhythm to the house that had been missing for years. Breaths. James noticed the small changes in himself, too. He found himself looking forward to the smell of her cooking, to the sound of her voice, and even to the gentle way she moved through the house. One evening after a long day of work, James sat on the porch with a cup of coffee while Emma cleared the table inside. He watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't felt in a long time.
He realized that having Emma here was not just convenient, it was comforting.
She had become a presence he couldn't ignore, a warmth in a life that had grown cold with routine and solitude. Despite this growing connection, James remained cautious. He was not used to relying on anyone, and the idea of allowing someone to truly get close was both tempting and frightening. He kept his feelings guarded, focusing on the practical needs of the ranch and the work that never ended. But every evening when the lights went out and the house grew quiet, he found himself thinking of Emma, wishing she were closer, wishing he could speak the words that had stayed locked in his heart for so long. Emma, too, felt a connection she had not anticipated. She admired James's strength, his dedication, and his quiet dignity. She enjoyed cooking for him, watching him enjoy her meals, and seeing the small but meaningful ways he expressed gratitude. But she sensed his distance, the walls he had built around himself, and she respected them, hoping that in time he might allow her a glimpse of the man beneath the rugged exterior. One night, a sudden storm rolled over the ranch, pelted the roof, and the wind howled through the trees. James was in the barn securing the animals and checking the fences when he realized he could not manage everything alone. He called for Emma, and she came without hesitation, helping him bring in the last of the animals and secure the barn doors. Wet and tired, they returned to the house, laughing quietly at their shared struggle against the storm. That night, as they warmed themselves by the fire, James realized how much her presence meant to him. He did not yet know what the future held, but he understood that he no longer wanted to face his lonely nights alone. Emma had brought something into his life that went beyond meals or chores. She had brought a sense of companionship, a light that made even the darkest nights seem less cold. As James finally climbed into bed that night, he found himself smiling. The storm had passed, but a different kind of warmth lingered in the ranch house, one that promised change, connection, and perhaps even hope. But, for the first time in years, he looked forward to the days ahead, knowing that Emma's presence was no longer just a convenience. It was becoming something essential, something he could not imagine living without. But surely the quiet, lonely nights remained for now. But with every meal, every shared task, and every small conversation, James felt the first stirrings of a companionship. James felt the first stirrings of a companionship that might, in time, fill the empty spaces in his heart. The rancher needed her cooking, yes, but more than that, his lonely nights were beginning to beg for something far more meaningful. Days passed on the ranch, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. James and Emma moved through their daily routines with quiet efficiency, yet an unspoken connection was growing between them. Every morning, Emma rose early to prepare breakfast, while James tended the cattle. The smell of sizzling eggs and fresh bread greeted him like a small, comforting ritual he had never realized he needed. Emma's presence brought more than just food into the house. It brought a sense of life and warmth that had long been missing. The ranch house, once quiet and empty, was now filled with small sounds of conversation, laughter, and the clatter of kitchen work. James, who had spent years relying solely on himself, found himself looking forward to these moments more than he cared to admit. One morning, James was surprised when Emma brought him breakfast in the barn, carrying a tray of steaming coffee, eggs, and toast. "Thought you might like to eat here," she said with a smile. "It's easier than running back and forth." James looked around the barn, the animals moving lazily in their pens, the sun casting long rays through the open doors. "You didn't have to do this," he said, but there was a soft note in his voice. Emma shook her head. "I know, but it feels right. You work hard and you deserve a proper breakfast." They ate together in silence, the sounds of the ranch around them. James realized how rare it was to share even a simple meal with someone who understood his life, someone who appreciated the work he did. He wanted to speak, to tell Emma how much her presence meant, but the words caught in his throat. He wasn't used to expressing emotions, and he feared that doing so might change the fragile balance they had created. Emma, on her part, noticed the tension and unspoken feelings. She had worked for other people before, but there was something different about James. He was strong, quiet, and disciplined, but she could sense the loneliness beneath his exterior. She wanted to connect with him, to show him that companionship didn't have to be complicated or burdensome. She started staying later after meals, helping with small chores, and occasionally joining him for tasks around the ranch. One afternoon, James asked Emma to help with mending the fences near the east pasture. The sun was high and the work was hard, but with Emma's help, the task went faster than usual. They worked side by side, passing tools and sharing small conversations about the animals, the land, and the routines of ranch life. "You really know your way around a ranch," Emma said, wiping sweat from her forehead. James chuckled softly. "I grew up here. It's all I know."
Emma looked at him thoughtfully. "I can see that."
"It's in the way you handle everything. Careful, steady, patient." James didn't respond immediately, but he felt a small warmth at her words. No one had ever noticed him this way before. He had always been just the rancher, the man who got things done. He had never been seen for who he truly was. As the days turned into weeks, their bond strengthened. Emma's cooking became more than nourishment. It became a source of comfort and joy. James began to notice the little things, the way she hummed softly while preparing meals, the careful attention she gave to the animals, the gentle way she handled every task. Her presence made the house feel like a home, a place where warmth and care were present in every corner. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the horizon, James found himself sitting on the porch, watching Emma in the garden. She was tending to small vegetables she had planted near the kitchen, her hands moving skillfully through the soil. The golden light of sunset bathed her in a soft glow, and James felt an unfamiliar pull in his chest. He realized that he was no longer seeing Emma just as a cook or a helper. She had become someone he wanted to be close to, someone he wanted to share his life with. Emma noticed James watching her and smiled. "The garden is coming along nicely," she said. "I didn't expect it to grow this well." James nodded, his voice quiet. "You have a good touch." "Everything seems better when you're around."
Emma paused, her eyes meeting his.
There was a moment of silence, a fragile connection hanging between them. Neither spoke further, but both felt the weight of unspoken feelings. As nights grew cooler, James found himself thinking of Emma more often. He noticed how he looked forward to her presence at meals, how he lingered in conversation with her longer than necessary, how he missed her when she stepped away for a moment. His pride and habit of solitude made him hesitate, but he could no longer deny the warmth she brought into his life. Emma, too, felt the growing connection. She admired James' strength, his dedication, and the quiet dignity that came from years of hard work. She also noticed his reluctance to express emotion, the way he kept a part of himself hidden, but she was patient, understanding that trust and connection took time, especially with someone who had lived a life of solitude. Particularly quiet evening. A storm began to roll across the ranch. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind picked up, rustling the leaves and bending the trees. James was checking the fences when he realized that he couldn't manage everything alone. Emma, who had been inside preparing dinner, came running out with a lantern.
"James, the north fence! One of the posts is loose," she called.
James nodded, relief washing over him. "I was just about to check it. Let's fix it together." They worked side by side, securing the fence against the rising wind. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, soaking them to the bone. But they laughed at the situation, their shared struggle against the storm creating a bond stronger than any conversation could. When the fence was finally secured, they returned to the house, dripping wet but satisfied with their efforts. Inside, they warmed themselves by the fire. The room smelled of rain, wood smoke, and the dinner Emma had managed to prepare despite the storm. James watched her move around the kitchen, her hair damp and her sleeves rolled up. There was a quiet strength in her, a resilience that mirrored his own, and he felt an unexpected sense of gratitude.
Thank you, he said softly.
"I couldn't have done it without you." Emma smiled, a little shyly.
We make a good team.
James nodded, but he felt a deeper meaning in her words. It wasn't just about the storm or the chores. It was about their connection, the way they supported each other, and the comfort they brought into each other's lives. As the storm passed and the night grew quiet, James found himself thinking about the long, lonely nights he had endured before Emma arrived. He realized that her presence had begun to fill a space he didn't even know was empty. Her laughter, her stories, and even the simple act of sharing meals had become essential to his daily life. Emma noticed the change in him as well. Behave. She saw the moments when he allowed himself to relax, when he lingered in conversation, when he smiled more freely. She felt a sense of satisfaction in knowing that her presence had brought not just warmth to the house, but also to James's heart. Over the next few weeks, their bond continued to grow. They shared meals, chores, and quiet moments on the porch, watching the sun rise and set over the sprawling fields. James began to open up, sharing small stories from his past, memories of family and his dreams for the ranch. Emma listened with patience and understanding, offering her own thoughts and experiences in return. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, James found himself speaking more freely than he had in years. "You know, I never realized how lonely I was until you came," he said quietly. Emma looked at him, her eyes soft. "I'm glad I could help," she replied.
"But you don't have to be lonely anymore. You don't have to face everything alone." James nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders.
For the first time in a long time, he felt hope, not just for the ranch, but for his own life. He realized that companionship, trust, and warmth were not weaknesses, but gifts that could make life richer and more meaningful. That night, as James lay in bed, he thought about the days ahead. He knew there would still be hard work, challenges, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that with Emma by his side, the quiet ranch house would no longer feel empty. Her presence had become a source of strength and comfort, and he found himself looking forward to each new day with a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. Emma, too, reflected on their growing bond. She had come to the ranch out of necessity, but she had found something unexpected: connection, trust, and a sense of belonging. She realized that her role on the ranch had become more than just cooking or helping with chores. She had become a part of James's life, someone who mattered, someone whose presence made the days brighter and the nights warmer. As the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, James and Emma sat together on the porch, enjoying the quiet of the evening. The ranch, once silent and lonely, was now alive with small sounds, shared moments, and the beginning of a deep, meaningful bond. And though neither spoke the words aloud, both understood that life on the ranch had changed. Their connection was growing stronger with each passing day, and the warmth of shared companionship had begun to fill the spaces that had once been empty. The rancher needed her cooking, yes, but more than that, his heart had begun to recognize the presence he had longed for all along. The days on the ranch had grown longer, yet somehow warmer. James and Emma had settled into a routine, though neither would have admitted how much the other had become a part of their lives. Emma's cooking had become something James looked forward to, not just the meals themselves, but the way she brought life into the quiet house. The ranch no longer felt like a place of solitude. It felt like a home, alive with her laughter and presence. One afternoon, James was repairing the barn roof while Emma tended to the small vegetable garden she had planted near the kitchen. She hummed a tune, quietly, the melody drifting across the yard, carrying a comfort that James didn't know he had been missing. Paused in his work, tools in hand, and watched her. The sunlight caught the strands of her hair, turning them golden in the warm light. James realized he had been noticing these small details for weeks now. The way she tilted her head when concentrating, the gentle care she showed toward the animals, the way her hands moved confidently through every task. Emma looked up and noticed James staring. She smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Do I have dirt on my face again?" she asked lightly, brushing at her cheek. James shook his head, trying to hide the sudden flutter in his chest. "No, you look fine," he said, his voice catching slightly.
He immediately cursed himself in his mind. He wasn't used to saying such things, and he hated that his feelings made him sound awkward.
Emma laughed softly, and the sound wrapped around him like a warm blanket. She returned to her work, leaving James to his thoughts, which were harder to manage than the barn roof. He had spent years building walls around himself, believing that solitude was safer than connection. Yet now he found himself wanting more, not just her presence in the house, but her attention, her company, her trust. Over the next few days, their interactions grew more personal. They shared stories of their pasts during breaks in their work. James spoke carefully, revealing small pieces of himself, memories of his parents, lessons learned on the ranch, and the few friends he had made over the years. Around in turn, shared stories of her family, her childhood, and the journey that had brought her to this small ranch town. With each shared memory, the distance between them seemed to shrink. One evening, after a long day of tending the fields, James invited Emma to sit on the porch with him. The sun had set, leaving a soft orange glow across the horizon. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant lowing of cows.
"You know," James said finally, his voice quiet, "I didn't realize how much I needed this."
But having someone around. Fresh. Someone to talk to. Someone who cares. Purr. Emma looked at him, her eyes soft and understanding. "I can tell," she said. "I've noticed it too. The house feels different. Alive." James nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon.
I've spent so long alone, I didn't think anyone could understand this life.
But you make it feel easier. Emma's heart warmed at his words. She had known from the beginning that James was a man of few words, yet beneath the rugged exterior, she sensed a depth of feeling. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but she also respected the space he had always maintained around himself. That night, as they prepared dinner together, a small, unexpected moment occurred. James reached for a pot at the same time Emma did, their hands brushing against each other. A spark of electricity passed between them, and both froze for a brief moment, unsure of what to say. James looked away quickly, embarrassed, while Emma laughed softly to hide her own sudden heartbeat.
Seems like we're synchronized, she said lightly.
James managed a small smile, but inside he felt the tension of long-suppressed emotions rising. He realized that his feelings for Emma were no longer just admiration or gratitude. They had grown into something deeper, something he hadn't anticipated and didn't know how to express. In the following days, the unspoken tension became more noticeable. James found himself lingering near Emma, helping with tasks that didn't require his presence, simply to be close. Emma, too, found herself seeking his approval and enjoying the moments when he noticed her efforts. Their conversations began to include personal jokes, teasing remarks, and shared glances that spoke louder than words. One afternoon, as they worked together moving hay bales in the barn, James suddenly paused. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at Emma with an intensity she hadn't seen before. "Emma, can I ask you something?" he said, his voice low.
Of course, she replied, curious. Do you ever anognate her every single one?
"Feel like this place could be more than just work?" he asked, gesturing to the barn, the fields, the ranch beyond. "I mean, could it feel like home?" She had felt the same way for weeks, but had been waiting for him to voice it. "Yes," she said softly. "I've felt that since the first day I came here. It feels alive, Rask, comfortable, safe." James nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. For the first time, he allowed himself to admit that the ranch had changed for him. Not because of work, not because of routine, but because of her. The walls he had built around his heart were no longer enough to keep out the warmth she brought. As the days grew shorter and the nights cooler, the bond between them deepened. They began to share evening walks around the ranch, talking about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes. James found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years, and Emma responded with patience and care. Their connection was unspoken yet undeniable, and each moment spent together strengthened it. One particularly quiet evening, a soft breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and rain from a recent shower. Breaths. James and Emma were sitting on the porch, sipping hot cocoa. The sky was painted with stars, more vivid than either had seen in the city. Emma shivered slightly, and James instinctively moved closer, draping his jacket over her shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly. Breaths. James shook his head. "No need. It's natural." But a long while they simply watched the stars, sharing a silence that felt comfortable and intimate. Neither wanted to break it, knowing that something significant was quietly growing between them. The next day brought a small crisis. A calf had gotten separated from the herd, and James had to find it before nightfall. Emma insisted on helping, refusing to stay behind. Together they tracked the calf through the fields, calling softly and searching through the tall grass. When they finally found it, James lifted the calf gently while Emma guided it back toward the herd. As they worked together, James felt a surge of gratitude and affection. He looked at Emma, her hair damp from the morning dew, her hands steady and sure, and realized that he couldn't imagine facing these challenges without her. Her presence had become indispensable, not just for the work, but for the courage and warmth she brought into his life. That night, after the day's work, they shared dinner in silence, both lost in thought. James wanted to speak, to tell Emma how much she had changed his life, but fear held him back. He wasn't used to expressing such vulnerability, and he worried about risking the fragile balance they had built. Emma, sensing his hesitation, reached out and lightly touched his hand.
James, you don't have to say it, she said softly.
I can feel it. And I feel it too.
James looked at her, surprised by her insight, and felt a wave of relief.
He realized that he didn't need to force words. Emma already understood. The connection they shared was stronger than anything spoken. Over the next few weeks, small gestures became their language. Emma would leave little notes in the kitchen, and James would respond with small acts of kindness, fixing a broken tool, bringing her favorite coffee, or sharing stories from his childhood. Their bond deepened through these small, meaningful interactions, each one strengthening the trust and affection between them. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, James and Emma sat together on the porch, watching the colors change across the sky. The warmth of the day lingered in the air, and a peaceful quiet settled over the ranch. James finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. Emma, I don't know how to say this, but you mean more to me than I ever expected. Emma turned to him, her eyes soft and full of understanding. I know, she said simply. And you mean more to me, too? A smile spread across James's face, one that was genuine and unguarded. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of hope, a belief that companionship, trust, and even love were possible for him. Emma reached out and gently squeezed his hand, and in that simple touch, the distance between them disappeared. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, had become a place of life and warmth. Meals were no longer just food. They were moments shared, memories made, and bonds strengthened. The chores, the long days, the quiet nights, they all held a new meaning, enriched by the connection that had grown between them. Days. James and Emma had found in each other not just companionship, but understanding, trust, and the beginnings of something deeper. Their bond was no longer just about the work on the ranch or the meals shared. It was about the comfort, support, and care that had quietly woven itself into every aspect of their lives. As the stars appeared in the night sky twinkling above the ranch, both James and Emma knew that life had changed. Their connection was undeniable, their hearts quietly aligned, and their lonely nights had begun to be replaced by warmth, hope, and the promise of something beautiful growing between them. The ranch was quiet that morning, bathed in soft sunlight that streamed through the windows and warmed the wooden floors. James Carter sat at the kitchen table, drinking his coffee slowly. Normally he would have been busy with chores from dawn to dusk, but today he felt restless, unsettled. Emma had gone into town early to run errands, leaving him alone with his thoughts. For weeks, he had wrestled with the growing feelings in his heart. Her laughter, her presence, her careful attention to every task on the ranch, it all had become more than just comforting. He had tried to convince himself it was just gratitude, or habit, or the simple need for companionship, but he knew deep down that it was something more, something he could no longer deny. James got up and walked to the porch, taking a deep breath of the fresh morning air. The fields stretched endlessly in front of him, but today they seemed different. They were the same land he had cared for all his life, yet now every corner of the ranch reminded him of her. The way she had tended the garden, the way she had helped secure the barn during the storm, the countless small moments where her presence had made his life easier and brighter. Breaths. He knew he had to speak to her, to tell her what he felt. But fear gripped him. Fear of losing the delicate balance they had built. Fear of rejection. Fear of revealing the vulnerability he had spent a lifetime hiding. For yet the longer he waited, the more he realized that avoiding the truth would only make his nights longer and colder. When Emma returned that afternoon, carrying a basket of fresh produce from the town market,
She found James standing near the porch, staring at the horizon.
He turned toward her as she approached, his expression serious yet gentle.
James, Emma said softly, noticing the intensity in his eyes. Is everything okay? He nodded, though his nerves betrayed him. Yes, mostly.
I need to talk to you. Talk about what? James took a deep breath, gathering courage. About us?
Psst. About how I feel. I can't keep pretending anymore that my feelings aren't real.
I care for you, Emma. More than I ever thought I could care for anyone. Boo. Emma's eyes widened, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. She felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief, joy, and quiet disbelief.
James, I feel the same way, she admitted softly. I have for a while, but I didn't want to overstep.
I wanted you to see it too. A small smile appeared on James's face, the first unguarded smile in weeks. Relief and happiness washed over him, replacing the tension that had gripped him for so long. He stepped closer to Emma, their hands brushing briefly before he reached out and took hers in his. From that moment, the dynamic of the ranch began to shift again. This time, not in the quiet comfort of routine, but in the warmth of shared emotion. Emma's presence had always made the house feel alive, but now, with feelings spoken aloud, the home became a place of joy, laughter, and anticipation for what the future might hold. They spent the next few days in a newfound closeness. Chores that had once been routine now held a quiet intimacy, handing each other tools, passing ingredients in the kitchen, sharing small glances and smiles that spoke volumes. Even the animals seemed to sense the shift in the air, moving calmly around them as if approving of the bond that had formed. One evening, after a long day of work in the fields, James and Emma sat together on the porch with mugs of cocoa. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and the cool breeze carried the smell of fresh grass and wildflowers. "I can't believe I waited so long to tell you," James said quietly. "I spent years alone, thinking I didn't need anyone. But now, I can't imagine my life without you." Emma squeezed his hand, smiling. "I'm glad you finally said it. I was hoping you felt the same way." They sat together in silence for a while, letting the moment settle around them. It was not a dramatic confession filled with grand gestures. It was quiet, real, and heartfelt. Both understood that love did not always need fireworks. Sometimes it grew in small, steady moments built on trust, care, and shared experiences. As the days turned into weeks, James and Emma's relationship continued to grow. They shared responsibilities on the ranch, balancing work and companionship seamlessly. James found himself enjoying tasks he had once seen as chores, now made meaningful because Emma was by his side. They tended the animals together, repaired fences side by side, and shared quiet meals filled with laughter and conversation.
Emma, too, felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before.
The ranch, which had once been intimidating in its vastness and isolation, now felt safe and welcoming.
She had found a partner in James, not just someone who needed her cooking, but someone who valued her presence, her opinions, and her heart. One particularly quiet night, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, James reached for Emma's hand.
The cool night air was crisp, and the gentle rustle of leaves added a soft soundtrack to the evening.
"Emma," he began, his voice soft, "I want you to know—"
"You're not just part of my life now. I want you to be my partner in everything, from the ranch work to the quiet nights to every moment in between."
Emma's eyes shone with emotion. "I feel the same, James."
"I want that too." The ranch, which had once been a place of solitude, now felt full of life.
Every corner held memories of shared meals, laughter, and hard work done together.
The once quiet nights were now filled with warmth, companionship, and the comfort of knowing that they were no longer alone. Days passed, and their love deepened naturally. Emma continued to cook with care, each meal infused with the same warmth she had always brought. But now James joined her in small ways, chopping vegetables, helping with cleanup, and sharing stories about his day. The kitchen became a place of connection, not just sustenance. One morning after a particularly cold night, James woke early and found Emma tending the animals before sunrise. He watched her work, the soft glow of the morning light highlighting the care she put into every task. Without a word, he stepped into the barn to help. Narration. Together they fed the animals, cleaned the pens, and prepared for the day ahead. By the time the sun rose fully, the ranch was alive with the sounds of movement, laughter, and shared effort. James realized that this was what life could be: full, meaningful, and shared with someone who mattered. Emma had become more than a cook, more than a companion. She had become part of his heart and home. That evening, as they enjoyed dinner together, James looked at Emma and smiled. "You know, I never thought a cook could change my life," he said, teasing lightly, though his eyes held sincerity. Emma laughed, shaking her head.
And I never thought a rancher could teach me so much about life, she replied.
Ah, their laughter echoed through the ranch house, a sound that had been absent for far too long. Outside, the fields stretched endlessly, the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear night sky. Inside, the house was filled with warmth, love, and a sense of belonging that neither had expected but both cherished. In the following weeks, James and Emma continued to build their life together. They planned small improvements to the ranch, shared responsibilities, and celebrated each success with quiet joy. Each day brought new challenges, but now they faced them as a team, drawing strength and comfort from one another. One afternoon, after finishing work in the fields, James and Emma sat together on a hill overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in golds and pinks, and the world felt still and peaceful. James took Emma's hand in his. "Emma," he said softly, "these past weeks, months, have been the best of my life. I know we've had quiet moments, and we've worked hard, but having you here, it's made everything better. I can't imagine my life without you now."
Emma smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion.
I feel the same, James. You've made me feel at home and safe and
happy. I can't imagine being anywhere else. Resting his forehead against hers. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the vast fields and the soft light of the setting sun, they knew their bond had grown into something permanent, unshakable and true. The ranch, once silent and lonely, had become a place of love, partnership, and shared dreams. Meals were no longer just food. They were moments to enjoy, celebrate, and connect. Chores were no longer just work. They were opportunities to support, teach, and laugh together. And nights, once long and empty, were now filled with warmth, conversation, and the comforting presence of someone who truly mattered. As darkness fell and stars glittered above, James and Emma sat together on the porch, hands intertwined, hearts full. The ranch, their home, their life, it was no longer a place of solitude. It was a place of love, care, and hope. They had found in each other a partner, a friend, and a source of happiness that neither had expected but both had longed for. And as the night settled over the fields, the quiet ranch house echoed with a new kind of sound, the sound of hearts finally finding each other, and the beginning of a life shared in warmth, trust, and unspoken promises of tomorrow.